gasket cloud. Whether it's Chevy versus Ford or Briggs versus Kohler or whatever it is, at the end of the day, every single manufacturer has its bad point. If you work with single-cylinder Briggs & Strattons, inevitably head gasket failure will happen. So this is an old-school single-cylinder head for a Briggs & Stratton, and this is a newer 502 head. So these 502 heads with the reinforcement bars and everything, these are found on the 502cc engines and the 540cc engines. While we're at it on this, the heads are really worn out on this particular engine that we're working on today. So I've got this 502 style head. So the 502cc engines, they have this X pattern on their intake. They're supposed to be an upgraded head and in theory should fit on the older block. So we're going to see whether that actually works today. These are reinforced heads that are an upgrade for this. But at the end of the day, this is off of a newer one. And as you can see right there, that is bad. That is a head gasket blown out. And that is what killed the connecting rod in the engine that this came out of. Now, Cheapskate here has an old school 14.5 in it. And this head came off of a 21 horsepower 540cc. And it will fit on here as an upgrade. But the thing is, it keeps blowing head gaskets, and that's part of the problem with these. Once they start blowing head gaskets, you'll usually get about 2 replacements, and then after that, they start to just repetitively blow head gaskets. So what we have here is we have our regular standard head gasket kit. These are like 10 bucks. Everything that I'm using in today's video, I will post a link for down below. And what we have here is we have copper. So we can buy a 2-pack of copper. We've got our kit here for being able to cut this copper plate up. And we've got a head gasket we used as a template. So today, we're going to see if we can use this saw to cut our own copper head gasket and stuff it on this engine that has a blown head gasket. Oh, if you're trying to figure out whether you have a single-cylinder Briggs with a blown head gasket, well, usually you'll start it up and it'll look something like this. Oh, there's the head gasket cloud. And then, to top it off with, if you don't blow the engine, you'll find this puddle underneath the front of it, right where the exhaust port comes out underneath. And the reason being is, here's what happens. When a single-cylinder Briggs & Stratton blows the head gasket, it blows the head gasket right here. So this is your cylinder where all your compression is. That compression fires through into here. And this is where the rods that go to your rocker arms come through. What that does is it sends pressure into the block of the engine. The PCV valve is then over pressurized and it shoots the oil out of the engine through the PCV valve into your carburetor intake, which then comes in through, cycles into here, and burns off, and thus you end up with no oil, or oil coming out of the exhaust when you shut the machine down. And that is a Briggs & Stratton head gasket failure. So, let's rip it apart let's make this using the little saw thing, and we'll go from there. I definitely would probably recommend not trying this unless you have a drill press. I don't usually say that kind of thing, but this copper is really flimsy, and this is actually a little on the thick side for what I should be trying to do this with. So what I did was I pilot drilled all of these holes. I've got a nice new fine step bit, and I'm going down through. I did note and make sure that I marked which ones were dowels so that I wouldn't accidentally drill them out too far. So I got one more to do, and I pre-drilled in order to be able to thread the metal cutting saw through. So the idea of these metal cutting saws is that you can stick the blade into that hole and then be able to jig your way around and then undo it and unthread the blade. Well, I'm 3 broken blades in, about a half an hour, and I am ashamed to admit that I cheated. I realized just how long this was going to take because of how thick this is, and I went over and I took my bandsaw and I cut reliefs in to be able to go down through. So we're making progress, and then we're going to try and do this hole and this hole. On these right here, if anybody has any knowledge on this, what size of these I really should have used, I've figured out that it seems to turn a little bit better when it's on these. These are a little bit slower cutting, it seems. These cut faster but don't seem to want to turn. At least that's what I'm discovering so far. Anyways, time to put blade number 4 in. We'll be back. There are some times in life that you have to admit that you took on more than you're capable of. And that's why they made power tools. Let's see if we can do this. I'm still trying to decide if the ugly snowman they say looks like me is a compliment or not.
It's dirty, you work in the garage.
Oh, it's dirty, I work in the garage. So yeah, there we go, folks. Tell me in the comments down below. Does the snowman look like me?
No, it needs a beard first.
Oh, it needs a beard?
Go get mine, we'll make a beard. Okay, okay.
One other thing that's kind of interesting to note is that on these older engines, basically everything is a 3/8, except for these that are 1/2 of an inch. But on newer engines, they're all 3/8 all the way through. My bet is probably to save time when they're building them in the factory. But, well, we're right here. If you look at this, how it's straight line, that tells me from the outside that this is the old style head. Now, there is an old style that has a semi-reinforced intake. We'll see whether this happens to be one, but I don't think it is at this point. Let's see, did I get all of them? I think so. Yep, here we go. All kinds of fun. Yeah, that gasket just utterly imploded because this thing was overheating. And look at that. That rod there was 1 iota away from going straight through. So it's a good thing I pulled the spare rods out of the other one. So there's that. As you can see, it's just utterly, totally coated. And yep, this is not a reinforced head. It's missing that. So we're going to clean this up and see if we can cram our homemade copper head gasket on. Now, we're not doing
Now, I'm
anything
gonna pause the
delicate.
video
We're
right
literally
here
slamming
because
this
I
thing
know
right
that the comment
together.
section is going
One
to
thing I
blow
wanted to
up
point
that I
out
didn't
is
bother
this is
to
the older
treat the
style,
gasket
and this is
put
the
it
newer
in
style.
and soften it and all
I
that
figure
kind
since
of
we're
stuff.
going with the newer head, we'll use these and see whether they bottom out or whether they work or not.
And this is an
But otherwise than
experiment.
that,
And on top of that,
we're just going
I
to
ordered
line this thing up and hand start
high copper
all of them
content piece that
and
was
go from
bending
there.
and warping.
That's our cutout
and hard to go and
gasket.
keep from doing stupid things
Here we
just
go.
trying to cut it out. In this case, I didn't bother. Should I have taken a map gas torch to it, heated it red hot, and dumped it in water? Probably. But in this case, I didn't bother. It ended up working out okay. But yes, you can blow up the comments with the idea that I should have heat treated this gasket.
And now I'm just going to double check everything. Just hand little bit extra. Yep, see both of those ended up giving just a little bit. And like I said at one point, when these go in, they're only in with like 40 or 50 foot-pounds. You really, most of the time, can rebuild these with just an inch-pound Dugga. See, that one, for some reason, had a lot of... There we go. That one's tight now. Now, the two that I find tend to move around the most are usually these two bottom ones. And I'm assuming it has to do with the amount of heat that they deal with. But I could be wrong. Yep, see, that one moved. And then this one I usually do last, because this is where all the oil sits in the head. So I want to make sure that that one goes down last. This one's the least important out of all of them. These ones here, and then this one last to make sure that the oil doesn't come out. Alright, so at this point we'll get these thrown on here. Those should be a couple of 3/8. Oh, look at that. They're filled with wasp nests. I'll be back. Alright, now here's a reality. I'm planning on doing abusive things to this engine and turning it at RPMs that it probably is not meant to be. So therefore, I'm swapping in 2 steel rods. You should not do what I just did. You should not swap in steel rods. It is a bad idea. You should put the aluminum where the aluminum's supposed to be, and the steel where the steel's supposed to be, and all that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm checking to make sure that they're both seated correctly and that they're cycling. And now I can see if I can get these valves to go on. Now we're going to try and do this the ghetto way the first time. And what we're going to do is we're going to press down really hard with our thumb here while pulling up and over. And see if we can get it on there. There's one. And there's 2. Now, before we put the spark plug back in, we're going to check and make sure they cycle. Okay, so exhaust valve is working, intake valve is working. There we go. So let's put a spark plug back in it. We've got the one that came out of it that was not the prettiest thing in the world, but we know that this spark plug was functional, so there's no reason it shouldn't still be. And don't over tighten spark plugs. Please don't be that idiot. We're going to hand check this right now. So where I have it right now, we should see the exhaust cycle. We should see the intake immediately cycle. And then we should be able to find the compression for this after that. So right now, the exhaust goes off. The intake goes off. So now it's got fresh chambered air. We should be able to feel it build pressure. And then move the exhaust. So I never felt any pressure there at all. So what that tells me is that right now, those valves are way too tight. See, there's no play whatsoever. So we're going to pop that. Oh, I got the wrong size apparently. That's interesting. So these newer heads use a different size than the old head does. Okay, so that's loosened up. So this loosens up. Let's loosen this one up first. So let's pop that. Whoops, I got that in the wrong spot. Let's pop that and let's loosen this. Let's loosen it a little bit more. Okay, right there is floppy. So now we know it's going to build compression when it comes around. So if we tighten that in, we know that should build compression. We need to get it cycled through so that, okay, so that released, that's the intake. So right there, right about in there should be when this should be loose and this should be loose. See, these should be about the same. And this one needs to be loosened up just a tad bit more. So loosen it just a tad bit more and then tighten it up. Okay. So now, right now, we should be at about top dead center. So we should see this go off next. And we should be able to feel the compression as we turn it. So right now, there it goes. Yep, we heard that. There's the compression. Okay, so that's still probably a little too tight. Let's loosen that just a little bit further, and then we'll probably see if this thing will turn over. There we go. So we'll put the valve cover on and put the oil dipstick in. See if this thing will turn over. Golo 3000 booster pack is on. Choke is on. Clutch down. screwed up and I cut that trail wrong. I should have gone right through, right in there, but I cut it and the rear end came over. But there we go. Cheapskate's not a perfect machine, but he was built on a budget and he does what he needs to for a budget build. Thanks for following. I hope this experiment helps others in the future. Have a good day.